Yep. Hi, everyone. Once again, thank you so much for joining Tea Time with AuthorAID. Welcome on board. We are AuthorAID. AuthorAID is a global community of researchers. More than 13,000 of us are here. And Tea Time with AuthorAID is a monthly community event of AuthorAID, which happens once or twice a month, where scholars from all over the world gather to discuss the prominent and important issues in academia and learn from each other. Unlike typical webinar, in this Tea Time with AuthorAID session, we thrive on open conversation rather than the lecture format. And today also we are going to do that. We are going to talk about theme that we have on hand, sporting and combating the helicopter research. I would like to set some ground rules before we move ahead with the session. Number one is please mute yourself when you are not talking. The second is Zoom has a lot of interactive features, and we would like to request you to use all of them. Turn on your video if it is possible, make it look like a very cozy in-person setting, although we can't do it in person. We can have a lot of conversation on the topic. Um, and the third would be that a recording has already started. And if you have any, if you need any technical support during the event, you can always contact me. You can text me here. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our host. So, Abhyudun is currently affiliated with the Institute of Responsible Business and Social Justice at the De Montfort University, UK. His current research focuses broadly on the process of economic development and how it is shaped by several factors, including innovation, entrepreneurship, and new technologies. He has led several impactful projects, including Nigeria's first social science research mapping and the evaluation of major entrepreneurship, education, and youth employment interventions. Abiodun interacts regularly with international and third sector organizations, including UNIDO, GIZ, I4 Policy, and the African Union Commission. He mentors early career researchers through AuthorAID and the Development Studies Association. He's an advocate of using open data as a pathway to overcome helicopter research. Now, I'd like to hand it over to him to take this session forward. We are going to have a lot of chat, and I am hopeful that you have your favorite drink with you. I'm going to go get myself some tea right now. Yeah, over to you.
All right, thank you, Asta, for that glowing uh, introduction, and welcome everyone. It's good to have you. The last time I hosted a session. That was sometimes in June, if I remember correctly. We were talking about something completely different. So today, we want to talk about the problematic practice known as helicopter research, or if you like, helicopter science. As Asta already mentioned, this is going to be an interactive session, so you would not see me share any slides or, um, any audiovisual material. The idea for us is to come together and discuss these issues based on our practical experience, based on our reading of the literature, whatever is relevant, or based on the experience of others that we are familiar with. So the way I would like for us to proceed is to have a conversation around a number of topics or a number of subtopics under our broader topic that I have thought of before now. On every one of those subtopics, I have a specific question that I'm going to be posing, and then I'd like to have your insight on them as a way for us to co-create this learning experience today. On each one of them, I have my own opinion or my own perception, but before I share anything, I would like to invite you to share first. If you feel more comfortable typing, I'll be happy to check the chat and read whatever you have typed. But at the same time, it will also be quite interesting if a couple of us in the call can unmute ourselves and make our contribution. So broadly, the subtopics that I would like for us to talk about, I already posted them in the chat. First is to try and understand what is helicopter research, and then why is it a problem? Is it specific to any discipline? And as researchers, particularly those of us who work in the Southern Hemisphere, where there is a comparatively higher level of resource constraints compared to the Northern Hemisphere, how do we know when we are being exploited or when we may be exploited through helicopter research? And overall, how does this conversation connect to equity in international research collaborations? And what are some of the steps that can be taken either to prevent or to mitigate the negative impact of helicopter research? Now, can I ask that we start by thinking about what is helicopter research? Now, my first question to you would be for you to think about a research project or any project whatsoever. So it could be a research project, could be a humanitarian aid project, could be a collaborative paper, any project that you've been involved in or that you know about. Just tell us very quickly who led it, who do you think benefited most from it, and why? And do you think that everyone felt equally valued in this project? So anyone is free to go. Just unmute yourself and go ahead. Or if you want to type, it's also okay. So any project you've involved in the past, uh, who led the project? Who do you think was the most significant beneficiary? And do you think that there was equity, that everyone felt valued? Who wants to go first? I surely don't want to go first. So who wants to go first? I know a couple of people on the call who have been part of international projects. So please be kind enough to share your experience with us. Any project, like I said, it could be a collaborative writing project. It could be a funded project and so on. I remember several projects that I've been part of, and the experience for me has been mixed. But there's a particular one that was in the news several years ago. Many of you would remember that at a point there was an earthquake in Haiti. It was a major earthquake that was all over the news, and the international community rallied together to to provide humanitarian support. People contributed and so on. And then a few months into the very big humanitarian effort, there was a news that broke. And the news was a scandal that a lot of the funding that has been raised actually has gone into the administration of several of the humanitarian organizations, to the point that millions and millions of dollars were spent on administration. So funding people's travel to go down to the epicenter of the earthquake, funding the procurement of consultancy services that do not necessarily have anything to do with the actual humanitarian effort going on the ground. So much so, only very little has gone into the actual humanitarian work. And what it seemed was that several aid organizations were using this occasion to raise funding to support their own activities. This is one way in which helicopter activities can manifest. Not exactly research, the example I've given. I'm still waiting for one or two persons to give us their research experience, and then we're going to link it and move it forward from there. Anyone?
Okay, maybe, Mr. I would suggest that maybe you would start off by defining clearly helicopter research, because you have defined it in context of a disaster, yeah, event, and then what came after. So I think to be focused on research, maybe you define it more clearly so that people can know what exactly to contribute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I was
Mm.
actually hoping to go for us to crowdsource a definition. I didn't want to give one, if you know what I mean. That was why I
Mm.
intentionally chose an example that is a bit tangential, but just to give a sense of what I mean when I
Mm.
say helicopter, you know, this sense. But I agree with you. I mean, so let's talk about what helicopter research would mean in the context of research. There's a
Otherwise,
part.
I'm happy to say a
Yes,
few
Margaret.
words.
Yes, Margreta, please go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
hi everybody. My name is Margrethe. I work with the Africa League Secretariat, which some of you may know, but I've also been a member of a research project in Kenya on innovation and renewable energies, and it was led by Professor Rasmus Lema, who is also part of the Global Leagues and the Africa Leagues network. And yes, I mean, you're insisting a lot to try to get something from some of us, so I'm just trying to contribute in that context. But in that project, we worked closely with partners from Kenya in the IRIC project. We worked with the African Center for Technology Studies, and we worked with the Moi University. And you're asking who led and who benefited. So the lead was Professor Lema as PI from there, but there were co-PIs from the other institutions, of course. The reason for having a Danish PI was that it was funding from from Danida, the Danish Minister of Foreign Affairs for development research. Who benefited the most from it? I think everybody actually benefited quite a lot from the collaboration, in the sense that that everybody learned a lot from this. And maybe to add, did everybody feel equally valid? You can always ask that question, of course. I hope so. But I think we try to avoid, maybe that can be a contribution to the definition of helicopter research and what it isn't, by saying something about what I think it is not. We were very particular about grounding the research with local, with local. That sounds so odd, but with the partners, with the Kenyan partners. So most of the research was done by PhD students on the program or the project, and then we were trying to support this knowledge gathering on different topics and so on. I mean, just to give you something. Sorry.
No. That's totally relevant, Margreta. That's entirely relevant. These are the kinds of contributions I was hoping for, experiential, and from which we can learn one or two things about what helicopter research might mean in our context as researchers. Now, that's very useful. So as I was saying before your contribution, Margreta, and I hope this is going to be useful. Now, there are two closely related concepts when we speak about helicopter research. There's a couple more. The interesting read, that resource that I shared just before we started, is a reflection of a research practitioner who herself is from the global south, but then has worked extensively and I think currently based in the global north on different types of unethical practices, including helicopter research, of course. So I've just put two definitions in the chart just to draw your attention to that. I tend to think of helicopter science or helicopter research as the practice in which a researcher with superior resources, now that definition says typically from a developed country, but that's not always the case. The key phrase here is superior resources. Okay? So it is the same practice if a researcher based in an urban center goes to rural environment and does not include the autochthonous people who are based there, does not get their views or their perspectives on the research questions, just goes there, collects data, travels out, uses the data however they want. Now, the phrase is actually, it's built upon the notion that you can, contrary to an aeroplane which has to fly above a certain altitude, you can go as low as you want to observe an environment in a helicopter without your feet ever touching the ground. So basically without grounding the research, to borrow Margreta's terminology now. Closely related to that is the notion of ethical dumping, where research is done at a different level, pretty much like hypocritically, all right? At a slightly lower or much lower level of ethical standards compared to what will be done in the better resource context. In most cases, when we think about helicopter research, we tend to think about the power imbalance between the global north and the global south. And thank you for the introductions. Please keep them coming. Again, I'm interested in the experience of the audience this morning. So going by this definition, so let's simplify helicopter science or helicopter research to mean the practice of people from a better resourced context coming into a less resourced context to gather data without necessarily grounding the research in the environment where the data has been collected from. And ethical dumping is where people, pretty much do whatever they want in an environment and then walk away. Again, I'm keen to hear from the audience. To what extent do these definitions relate or reflect your experience? Have you ever seen or observed anything like this or read anything that that shows these kinds of characteristics? Anyone? Feel free to type or mute yourself and speak. Anyone? I'm keen for us to learn from one another this morning. So please, anyone, just feel free to unmute yourself and speak. So this is what helicopter research is. I'm moving on in the meantime to what the next issue is. Why do I think this is a problem? Why do I think it's a problem? Now, one of the ways I like to think about the problem of helicopter science is a bit of an anecdote, an untrue story, almost a joke if you like, but it is a joke that kind of aggregates the experience of many communities, local, quote and unquote now. The joke is told about a group of researchers who went to a particular village, and because they heard that in that village, the mangoes tend to grow so big, the mango fruits tend to grow so big. And they went there and did some research. They tried to isolate the particular, I don't know whether you will call that enzyme now, the particular thing that characterized those mango trees in that village that made them grow so big. And then they went away. Of course, they used an interpreter because they didn't speak the language. The interpreter was unpaid. Even if they paid the interpreter, I don't think it would have changed much. So they went away, published their research, and as a result of that research, they built an entire company around, marketing these mangoes as a superfood. And, because of that, people were always visiting this community to the point that a tourism industry developed, and that industry was beginning to affect the livelihoods of the people. But then there had to be additional infrastructure to support the tourism and so on and so forth. And, to the people who have always lived around the mangoes, it was strange. They didn't understand why anybody was making a fuss. And if you think about the fact that there really wasn't any feedback into the community, both in other than the infrastructure that is meant to serve the tourism, which again is a bit extractive. There really wasn't any giving back to that community. Now, at a conference, somebody asked these researchers if they ever shared their findings and to get the opinions of the people who live in that community. One of the co-authors of the paper responded by saying, we would have loved to share, but people do not subscribe to our journal. Now, I find that anecdote interesting because, I mean, as I was describing it, I'm sure you would have spotted a number of problems with that. It's clear that research was exploitative. The researchers went there, did their own thing, did not seek the input of the people in the agenda, and did whatever they wanted, took all the benefits they could get. We might say that the local community benefited in terms of infrastructure, but when you think about the purpose of those infrastructures, it becomes clear that it was not particularly for improving the livelihoods of the people. If those people got any advantages from those infrastructure, those advantages will be spillovers rather than the original intention. And we see this happen, we see this happen a lot. This is one of the reasons why I personally believe that helicopter science is a big problem. The fact that it leaves little of benefit to the community. And I like the example that Margareta gave of that project. I'm familiar with that project and I know how well grounded it was. There are no perfect projects. I mean, we're all human. There will be, certain lessons we would have learned about how to do things better, if we wanted to do them again. But the truth is, we better at trying to preempt and prevent helicopter research. Teams are better than one another across different parts of the world. Now, again, I'm keen to hear if anyone has any experience that relates to the anecdotes I've given so far, or if you've been part of an international project or even a national project where you saw these kinds of power imbalance or inequity, so to say. Anyone, feel free to type. I'm checking the charts. I'm seeing the introductions. Thank you all very much for that. But yeah, okay. Anyone wants to go? Have you seen any semblance of what I have described so far? Okay. Now, one of the good things about these is that having this conversation, even if many of us are not familiar with the concept, gives us a sense of many things that could go wrong when we do research. Now, the next question that I've been thinking about is conversations around helicopter research is more in the health sciences. Can I ask, how many of you are from the social sciences? Or, okay, no, let me rephrase that, are not from the health sciences? You can.
Not from health?
Not from health, yes.
Okay.
How many are not from health sciences? Just indicates with
and if you have worked on health, what do you do?
Okay, yeah. No. What I mean, that's a very good observation. What I mean is that your background or specialization is not in health. You may have done one or two projects in the health area, but your specialization is not in the health sciences. Anyone? I'm going through the introductions and I see that we have quite a number of people who are not necessarily from the health sciences. I see someone from soil science. I can see colleagues from NASA. There's a soil scientist. We have someone who does research at the intersection of ICT, innovation systems, and so on. And then we have you, Margreta. I know what you do, innovation studies, development, and so on. So we have quite a nice mix. Can I ask, have you ever encountered anything that looks like, okay, so we have someone from entomology, or rather, let me rephrase that question. Have you ever, before this morning, have you come across the phrase helicopter research or helicopter science? And what was the first thing that came to your mind? Feel free to type that in the chat box. The first thing that came to your mind when you heard helicopter research. Okay, someone has not heard from, or not heard about it before. That's Dr. Orewale from NASA. You never heard about it before. That's interesting. Oh, Abigail, the first time of hearing helicopter research, Adebonga Ajibade, not at all. Okay, that is interesting. And again, this is why I said that I think it's useful that we're talking about this particular practice. And I want to believe that given the conversation so far, we are beginning to get a sense of what it is. So I think it will be useful, given the mix of this audience, to talk about how to spot it. How to spot it. All right. Yeah, thank you, Margaret. I saw your reflection on the anecdotes that I gave, that the IREC project could have done more. That's exactly the point I was making, that I mean, we're not perfect, we are humans, but the effort, making that effort, showing that mindfulness, I think is an extremely important thing. Okay. All right. Beautiful. Beautiful. So now let's talk about how to spot, where I was talking about whether helicopter research is discipline specific. The truth is it is not. If you read around, if you put the phrase helicopter research into Google or Google Scholar, most of what you will find will be related to the health sciences. And I can tell you why. The reason that because of the sometimes invasive nature of health research, there's a high risk that people are exploited. Here's what I mean. Take vaccine development, for example, or the development of a new drug. The way it goes is that the new drug will be developed in the laboratory. It will be tested on animals first. Then there will be a stage 1 clinical trial, stage 2 clinical trial, and so on. I mean, I'm not an expert in that, but I know that that's the process they follow. Now, by the time it gets to human trials, that's what they call it. I think that's the stage 2 clinical trials. When it gets to testing it on humans, now, this is a very invasive process because the drug is in the process of development. At that point, the drug should be safe enough for human consumption. But there have been occasions where it went wrong. The clinical trials went wrong. People died as a result of that. So, when you are developing a drug and you're not entirely sure of what the side effects may be and so on and so forth, there have been cases in history where some of those drugs, rather than testing them in the context where they were developed, I mean, usually this is the global north. I mean, that's not to cast an aspersion, but I'm just trying to describe, some of the historical accounts that I've seen before and the reason why this is a big discussion in the health sciences. So some of the tests are done in localities where people are not even aware of what they are taking. Now, that is a problem because people die in the process. But there is a way it manifests in the social sciences as well. Okay, for example, I've seen some research. It's a paper in 2021. Let me share a link to that paper in the chat and you can read on your own time. This is the link to the paper. In 2021, what they did was to analyze the authorship of the Human Development Report. I made reference to this in an intervention that I made at the African Next Conference that was concluded, just last week, yeah. So they analyzed the authorship of the Human Development Report and the World Bank World Development Report. For those of you who work in the social sciences and in development, you are potentially familiar with these reports. And these reports are very important because, it's the World Bank, and they have access to top-level policymakers across the countries, and then they can directly advise them. Now, common sense would say that when you want to write a report that has significant implications for developing countries, what do? You have to ensure that you bring people with expertise from these countries to the table, to conversations. It turns out that this analysis, not by me, by Ronconi and colleagues, showed that of all the authors of the UNDP's Human Development Report between 1978 and 2020, that's for the World Development Report. For the Human Development Report, they did the analysis from 1990 to 2020. Now, only 9% of all the authors of the Human Development Report lived and worked in a developing country. Now, what that means is that the voices of people with grounded expertise is not predominant in the conversation. Of the World Development Report is even worse. Only 0.3% of all the authors from 1978 to 2020 lived and worked in a developing country. Again, it's a sign that the voices are not that hard. There are many reasons that explain that. The assumption that there isn't enough expertise in developing countries. But I think the question, if the expertise is not there, why don't we just invest in developing it? Okay? Why don't we just invest in developing these expertise? Now, having said that, let's quickly talk about how do we support helicopter research. I think this is important for this audience because, as you have said, several of you are hearing of it for the first time. What are the characteristics? Number one, there is limited local involvement. Now, as I'm saying these things, I would like you to reflect on what your experience is. If you've been part of an international project, to what extent were you involved? And, in my own practice, what I have seen is that many times the research questions are already set. The research agenda is already set, and people are invited to contribute to it. The process of co-creation suggests that, everybody's involved from the beginning. Now, at this point, can I ask if there's anyone in the audience who has been part of a research project, an international research project, and you co-created everything from the beginning? Anyone? I'm just interested in how this. Okay. Okay, so this is Kefa. Kefa, can I ask that you unmute and share this experience? Because I think it's also consistent with the question I was just asking about, have you experienced co-creating research that you were involved in? Kefa, are you in a position to unmute, or would you prefer that I read your contribution and then we'll talk?
I don't mind. Hi, greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever we are. I'm calling from Kenya, Nairobi, and I was just responding to one of the colleagues who asked to expound more. So I was texting, but very quickly, I'm doing I'm a student, postgraduate at because I'm pretty sure one of the reasons why people are kind of refraining from speaking is once our introducer said it will be uploaded on YouTube, so they're kind of scared. So let me just mention that out. But going forth, I think it's a very brilliant one, and you've touched something that it made me come back to school to study. So working with local organizations in in the global south, let me use Kenya as a case study, you'll find, number one, these superior, in quotes as we call them, the superior researchers will have their own anticipation. So for them to be secured from the crucifixion, they will hire some locals, but these some locals will be subjected to the master's anticipation. So one, I mean, because I've grown from the ghettos, I've grown up until where I could see how the communities are being driven. They will lie. I mean, they will create some data that don't exist and everything so that they can get funding. You see, for them, it's not about the end goal. It's about the means, or vis-a-vis, if you wish. So I'll stop there and then you'll proceed. But yeah, so that's why for me, helicopter is not just about superior research, but also helicopter is that detachment, which I think you said, the detachment from the community, in the aspect that the people even who are being selected to conduct the research, they are not of pure mind. They are not of, there's no authenticity, that anything that comes contrary, they will want to neutralize it per se, as long as the master's idea remains to supersede, and that is not the essence of science. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kefa. I remember one of my colleagues and I did a study for an international funding organization, and we had to interview lots and lots of people with experience. I remember we interviewed a senior official who is Nigerian, based working with the UN for several years. And, one of the recurring threads in these interviews is the extreme importance of openness, neutrality, when particularly, researchers with superior resources or even donors and funders approach the context that is relatively under-resourced. As I said, I mean, it's easy to think about these, in the polar way of global north versus global south, but it's mainly about the relativity or the relativeness of resource availability. This happens also with, for instance, an international NGO in a developing country that works in a rural setting. To what extent do they co-create things with the people who will be affected by their decision? And so one of the recurring threads in the conversations that we had is the need for researchers and funders to have this consciousness that it's not all about you, your perceptions, or your opinion, but it is more about the co-creation processes. So it's extremely important to begin to engage from the beginning. Now, that reminds me of another very interesting story of how, some donors went to a village to sink boreholes for them because they believed that these people didn't have access to potable water. And they realized that every time they sunk the borehole, some people will go there and vandalize the pump. So water doesn't come. And, this is a village where they don't have potable water. It didn't seem logical that you would give them potable water, a source of potable water, and people go there and vandalize it. And you know what happened eventually is what they should have done in the beginning was what they did later. They went to engage with the leadership of the community. And then the leadership of the community invited the men because it's a paternal society, right? So they then had a frank conversation with these donors and said, look, we don't need this water. What we need is something that gets our children out of the house, especially early in the morning. Because you see, look at all the houses in this community. They all have one room, okay? And so in the morning, we prefer to send our kids out to the stream, which is far away, for them to get water, because that is the only privacy that we have with our wives to do our conjugal business, all right? So you see, the problem as it appears to the outsider is completely different from the way it appears to the community. So co-creating the research questions is an extremely important thing. So we were talking about how to spot helicopter research, limited local involvement, data extraction, just going around collecting data and taking them away, limited knowledge sharing. And to be honest, it's easy for any one of us to get caught in some of these practices. I mean, when we interview people, sometimes we put in the questionnaire, when we administer surveys, we put in the questionnaire, we will get back to you with the results of our findings. When was the last time you did that? Truly. When was the last time? And this is a question that I always ask. Before you make that promise, be sure that you're going to share indeed. I recently finished a consultation again with another colleague for an organization where we were talking about, equity in research funding, North-South equity within, among funders, the North and the South, the Global North and the Global South. We promised all of our interviewees that we will share the findings with them, and we're in the process of doing that now. Okay, and I think that is very, very important. Now, we will not have had a well-rounded discussion today if we don't talk about how to deal with this problem. Now, I've seen in the chat that a couple of people are asking, for my contact details, putting the thoughts together. I can guarantee you that I have put together some notes for this session, and I will share that with Asta or with Andy in AuthorAID. And if you have registered for this event, they will be able to reach you by email, and then you can have that. So what can we do to deal with helicopter research? Given what we have discussed so far, we're almost running out of time. It's amazing how quickly time flies when you're having a conversation about an important topic. I'm interested in hearing what you think about how this problem can be addressed. I want to assume that we all agree it's a problem. We understand what the problem is. Anyone, what do you think can be done? Again, I have my own set of prescriptions, but I'm keen to hear what you think. Anyone can unmute, or you can type in the chat box. What do you think?
So my concern is when research is done, it's about getting new information which can improve the status quo, which can change the current circumstances or contribute to the body of knowledge. In research, the key thing is ethics, so that the results can be relied on. So when you talk about helicopter research, what it was first time I heard it, the word helicopter research. I did not know helicopter research, but I was interested in the definition. So from what you have defined, it comes to ethics. I don't know, because if you do things in that way, is that ethical? That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm.
That's a very important observation. It's very useful. It is not just about ethics. Of course, it's ethical behavior. And that was why I also isolated the notion of ethical dumping. But it's not only about ethics. It's also partly about positionality. What that means is what is going on in the mind of the researcher as they approach what they do. Let me give you another example. I was at a conference on development. Okay, so it was a development economics conference. I'm mindful of time now. It was a development economics conference. And you see, questions, so all of the papers that were presented used data either from India or from an African country. Okay, every single one of them. And the question I kept asking myself is, none of these papers has a co-author from a developing country. All of those papers were heavy in terms of mathematical modeling, and they were making conclusions, strong ones, about developing countries where the data came from. And quite frankly, and I say this with all sense of modesty, I could see, given my extensive experience working in an African country, I could see why and how some of the recommendations they are making are either not going to work or they are just wrong. Okay? Because it is not grounded. So you see, while the problem of ethics is there, helicopter research goes beyond ethics. okay? And I'm seeing a number of comments on how we can deal with this problem. Margreta is, so, has raised the point that awareness and an open mind is extremely, they are both extremely important, and I agree with that completely. Having the consciousness that this is a problem and being willing to talk about it as we have done here today, I think is good. And by the way, I have to say that AuthorAID, offers a safe space to have these conversations. There should be no fear of backlash from any from any avenue. And Angela said research is about problem solving. So we should get the people who the problem affects involved in the process, which is absolutely correct. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm saying this name correctly. Gioti or Ioti said that the example of projects is valid, the examples of projects that we were talking about that are conducted solely from the perspective of funders and do not take into consideration the inherent needs of society. What that means is that we have to co-create the process of the research. Now, as a person, I have an issue with the agenda of a funder or of a researcher who approaches, researchers from an under-resourced context with predefined research questions and are not even open to suggestions about these. Again, I'm saying this because of what I've seen before. There are occasions where, we talk about research to solve a particular problem in developing countries. And then when you look at the kinds of research questions that are supposed to be answered, you ask yourself, who is even asking these questions in the first instance? In the context where the questions are supposed to be answered. So the process of co-creation, having an open mind to have these conversations, I think is important. Building stronger South-South partnerships will empower research bargaining power. That makes perfect sense. And it's a recommendation that we made in a study that we conducted recently on equity in funder level partnerships. Creating research involving intervention, inclusion of researchers in the research area is interesting because there seems to be a consistency in the suggested solutions that we are seeing here about. It seems to me to speak so much about equity and inclusion, ensuring that we have the voice of the people in the area where the research is to be conducted. Now, David is saying once research funding, once money is involved, basically, it's difficult because he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And well, yeah, we need to continue to raise awareness. I agree with that, and co-creation would help a lot. Farouk has said local funding should be enhanced or should be increased. Again, I agree with that. Agenda setting is strongly connected to funding. So if in an under-resourced context, the more funding is made available to research, no matter how little, the better. Strengthening collaboration, taking the inherent needs of the society into consideration, and so on. I would like to stop just in about a minute, if Andy and Asta do not mind, just so that we have a couple of minutes to wrap up. Again, as I said, I will share the notes from this conversation with Asta and Andy so they can share with everyone who has registered. My contact details are on there, but in case anyone else wants to reach out, I'm leaving my email address in the chat box so that we can always continue the conversation. And I'm hoping that Asta or Andy would also provide the contact details for AuthorAID and a few additional details. So thank you all very much for your engagement this morning. Let me hand back to Asta. Is that you or Andy that would do the wrapping up?
Nope, I think Andy is not here.
All right.
Nope, he is not here. So yeah, wait a minute. I have Okay, don't leave yet. We have to take a picture so that we can post it on
Ah,
our social media. This is our tradition. Another thing is I'm going to share some of the social media links through which you can stay connected with AuthorAID. Here are the links. We have everything: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Google Group. We also, I'd like to share a little bit about the Google Group. Google Group is a place where the discussions keep on happening, and I would like to recommend you to follow us at other places and also the Google Group. Sign up there. You can sign up to our website by using the link there, which is the community of more than 13,000 scholars from around the globe. You get the first-hand information about the blogs, articles, and resources. You can also contribute the blogs, articles, and resources. You can write your own or contribute the resources that you thought were useful during your scholarly journey so that others can benefit. We make a video, we have a YouTube channel, we have short and long videos on different topics. So you can always use AuthorAID as a knowledge hub from where you can learn a lot. Apart from this, give me a minute while I get us the link to our upcoming tea time with AuthorAID on the okay. So on 29th November, at the same time, we'll be having tea time with AuthorAID on empowering research excellence through open science, which is a very hot topic, open science at the moment. And I know many of us want to learn and share our experience about this. So link to register is shared here. Can you see it? It says buy ticket, but it is actually free, like this event. So feel free to register, and I look forward to seeing you in that event also. So now if you are comfortable, please turn on your video. I can see some of you, Lena, Maruf turning on the video. Miracle also did that. So yeah. While we are at it, I'd like to thank Abhyudun for hosting such an insightful session. Thank you so much for being with us and hosting the session. We'd love to have you in upcoming tea time also. Okay. I would take the screenshot and I'd like for you to smile or do something. Okay. Uh,
that's funny.
okay. Now something fun. Like, thank God it is Friday and I have weekend coming ahead. So think about your weekend plan. Maybe you're sleeping whole day like I'm doing, or anything, and do something fun.
That's a good one. I mean, interestingly, I have to jump on another meeting after now. So while I thank God it's Friday, I also have a very busy Friday.
Sorry about that. It's almost 4 p.m. in Nepal, so yeah. So, any fun poses? I am not going to wrap up the meeting before you.
You
Yes,
can get people to get people to clap hands online?
yeah.
You know, but you can clap. Abiyudun, we can clap hands. If you turn your
That's very good. If you do
right
like this, I
hand,
can capture it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So no, you need. Yeah, well, that also we
Okay,
can do that
thank
again.
you. Thank you for the idea, Mark. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Looking forward to seeing you at our other events, and also suggest us what you would like to learn, so that we can arrange those kind of event via our platform. We are always open about that. You can email me for that. I will drop my email in the same way you got the link from the same medium. Uh, thank you so much. Goodbye. And thank you so much, Avyudun, and everybody for participating. Looking forward to seeing you the last Friday of November for another tea time. Bye bye.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Bye.